So let's do that. Kum Len and Abak Gemara. We are up to the Yud of Aleph. Those who didn't go to Tashlach yet should do so today. It's a good opportunity. Mishnah. We're continuing discussions of Yom Tov between an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says. So on Yom Tov you have all the same halachas as Shabbos, but on Yom Tov the Torah says that you can do things which are necessary for eating and for cooking. And then there's a rule. There's a machlekes Rishonim how far back do we go to say that you can do all these things. The general rule is anything you could have done before Shabbos, you should have done before Shabbos, and it's only or Yom Tov, only things that is better if it's fresh and all that, cooking and baking. And there is a discussion now of the concept of metoich. Metoich means that once we allow you to do, we're going to talk about carrying, for example. Once we allow you to carry things that are necessary to eat, can you also carry a siddur to shul, a talis to shul, because they are not necessary for eating at all. But metoich shehutra l'tzedich, once you allow us to do things which are necessary for eating, hutra nami shalei l'tzedich, and if we allow us also to do things which are not necessary. So we're going to see, according to one version, we'll find conclusion. That's the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai says, "Ein meitzin." You're not allowed to carry on Yom Tov. Lo yasa katan, a child. Lo yasa lulav. You cannot take your lulav to shul because it's not to do with eating. And v'lo yasa sefer Torah. Nor can you take a sefer Torah lo shusarabim. Nor can you take a sefer Torah shusarabim. You're carrying on Yom Tov. And Beis Hillel is mate. Beis Hillel permits all that. What's going on here? Tony Tana Kamed Rabbi Shkabavdima, the student studied before Rabbi Shkabavdima, and he brought a brayso. So it said, "Hashoichet oilas the dava." On Yom Tov we bring every day. You bring an oilas tzibur, which is a carbon tamid. On Yom Tov as well, we have an oil, not a tzibur yochid, but it's a chiyuv. It's an oil which we are obligated to bring. It's called an oilas riyah. An oil that when you call a yid upon arekum, you shouldn't appear before me empty-handed. So we have to bring a carbon oil. If to do it the first day Yom Tov, if you didn't, you have the entire Yom Tov to do it. But we're talking about an oilas nadava. You volunteer throughout the year. You say, I'm going to bring a carbon oil. So it's a kapar mitzvah say, or whatever the reason is if you're not allowed to bring it on Yom Tov itself, because since nobody eats from it, the entire carbon, it's an oil, gets burnt on the mizbeach. So it's called oilas nadava. You're not allowed to bring it on the mizbeach. So sheichet oilas nadava. The Yom Tov like you get malchus. If you shech the animal, you get malchus, because again, nobody's eating from it. Amli, the Amalach Mani, who the author of this brayso, must be Beis Shammai. The Amri, because he says, Loi Amrina, we do not believe in the principle of Metoich Shehutra Haitzal L'Tzeilis, because we allow carrying where it's necessary, Hutra Nami Shalei L'Tzeilis, we also allow where it's unnecessary. Because if we are talking about Beis Hillel, Amri, don't we say Metoich Shehutra L'Tzeilis, Hutra Nami Shalei L'Tzeilis? He says in our Mishnah, since you're allowed to carry food, you're also allowed to carry a child, a lulav, and a sefer Torah. These are not necessary for eating. Is it that Hillel believes in the principle when it comes to carrying, that Metoich, things which are necessary for Yom Tov, you're allowed also do other things. You're allowed to carry other things. So it's saying Mishchita. Just like you're allowed to shech. Once you're allowed to shech an animal to eat on Yom Tov, you're allowed to shech other animals which you cannot eat on Yom Tov, like a carbon oil. Halchanam here too. Metoich shehutra shchita l'tzeidik, hutra nami shalei l'tzeidik. Also allowed to do it even when it's unnecessary. Maskiv lo rabba. So that's in other words, that's how we understood pshat in the Mishnah. That's how we understood. That's what was said before. And that's how we understood that it's to do the principle of metoich. Maskiv lo rabba. Rabba said, how do you know? The Mishnah doesn't explain what the crux of the argument is. How do you know that is the crux of the argument? Memai the Beis Shammai Beis Hillel b'hapliki. How do the argument is? Dilma perhaps be'eruv v'haitzal l'Shabbos ein eruv v'haitzal l'Yom. Maybe the argument is something totally different. Or maybe their argument is only limited to carrying, and their argument is just like we had when we had Yom Kippur, an argument whether there's an Isa of carrying on Yom Kippur, Mahatayda. So too, they have an argument the Isa of carrying on Yom Tov, Mahatayda. Who said B'chlal Haitzah is one of the Isur of Yom Tov? Like a malacha, agree a week malacha, maybe it doesn't even apply to Yom Tov. What exactly means eruv? And therefore, Beis Shammai says it does apply. Nobody believes in the principle of metoich. Maybe this brayso that says that you cannot check the carbon oil and you get malchus is good to everybody, because nobody believes in metoich. Only things which pertain to eating on Yom Tov we permit. Anything else we don't permit. And what's the argument over here? But carrying, whether b'chal is issue of carrying or not on Yom Tov. The word eruv v'haitzah, Rashi learns that eruv means eruv chatzeris. And what do you call it? And even though, because if you're not allowed to carry, then you also need on Eidul Chatzedus. It's Eidul V'Haitzah. And that's how Rashi learns. Teisha doesn't like the Pshat at all, because why would you need an Eidul Chatzedus on Yom Tov? If you're carrying food, you don't need an Eidul Chatzedus. You're allowed to carry on Yom Tov. Everyone agrees you're allowed to carry food on Yom Tov. So what exactly the Eidul Chatzedus you need for? So therefore, they learn it's not Eidul Chatzedus, the Chatzedus, like Rashi's gives it. It's Eidul Chatzedus, and we mix Eidul V'Haitzah. We mix the Isser V'Haitzah together with all the other malachas that apply to Yom Tov, which are all of them. Anyway, so how do you know what's the Pshat in the Mishnah? That's what he's asking. And he explains, Mar Sovar Eidul V'Haitzah l'Shabbos. One of them holds that there is Eidul and there's V'Haitzah for Shabbos, but the Eidul V'Haitzah l'Yom and Eidul V'Haitzah l'Yom Tov, and that's Shammai if you're not allowed to carry the child. Mar Sovar, and Hillel says Eidul V'Haitzah l'Shabbos. Yes, the pasuk where it talks about you shouldn't carry anymore by Avidu Kol B'Machna, don't bring any more stuff to the Mishkan, food products to the Mishkan, because that is Shabbos. You're not allowed to carry. But the Eidul V'Haitzah l'Yom Tov, there's no Isser V'Haitzah to the Yom Tov. See what it says. Yimi chastised the Eden for what they behave. He says, don't carry anything on Shabbos. Sounds like from there, but Shabbos in only Shabbos shouldn't carry, not on Yom Tov. And according to the Shammai, he says that you're not allowed to carry Yom Tov either. Saying that Yimi has chastised the Eden for Shabbos, you get skillet. For Yom Tov, you only get a lot. So he's chastised the Eden on Shabbos, don't carry. Yom Tov he gave up on, at least on Shabbos. Not that he's saying that he give you license to carry Yom Tov. Anyway, so Rabbi is saying, who told you the argument in the Mishnah revolves around the question of Metoich? The argument Mishnah revolves around Bechlal, what is the issue of carrying? But everyone agrees there's no such principle as Metoich. Masker, Rabbi Yosef asks, Elamiyato, according to you, that everyone holds no such principle as Metoich. But the argument whether Bechal is of carrying. One of the reasons why you're not allowed to touch muktzah on Shabbos is you're not allowed to move muktzah around. Must get you to carry. Interesting is an argument the Ravid and the Rambam why you're not allowed to carry. The Ravid says that muktzah is I guess corollary of the issue of carrying. You tamper with things that you don't really need on Shabbos. You might by mistake carry it outside. The Rambam gives three other reasons why. One of them is because you might end up doing the malacha that this particular muktzah item is meant to do, and you should do that. One is, how do you show you're resting on Shabbos? And so especially somebody who's unemployed doesn't work, worse, a whole week doesn't work. How does he show he's resting? So therefore we have laws of muktzah. So how the Rambam learns this Gemara here and another Gemara behind Shabbos is an issue that the Mepharshim discuss. But I basically have a simple question. If you tell me there's no Isser of carrying on Yom Tov, then why is the muktzah on Yom Tov? Why can't you touch things which are muktzah? Who cares if you touch it? You might carry them. Who cares? He's no Isser of carrying. So he asked, Ma'ato, why are they carrying, arguing about a Sefer Torah or a lulav or a child? Lift the gubavanim. Talk about stones, which are muktzah, and see if you're allowed to move stones about or not. And then muktzah not, because the whole reason muktzah is purely because of carrying. So therefore the Gemara says, since they're not arguing in stones, Shema Mino, clearly that carrying is an Isser on Yom Tov, and therefore the muktzah applies on Yom Tov. But what they're arguing on the principle of Mitoich. And what's the argument? They're arguing about when you carry, when it's not necessary. In other words, like for food, whether it's permitted or not permitted. But everyone holds you not allowed to carry on Yom Tov. And the pasuk by Avidu Kol B'Machna is referring to Shabbos, but also Yom Tov as well. And I'll prove to you as well that Rabbi Yechon also holds that the argument revolves around Metoich. Now, there's a very fundamental argument in Rashi and Tosfos about this concept of Metoich. So does that mean allowed to carry a stone for Moshe on Yom Tov when it's not necessary at all? It seems clear to me that you have to use the Rashi. Tosfos here, Rashi said, but it's also in Ksubas. Well, big Tosfos there. How do we understand how we understand Metoich? Rashi understands that Metoich means that there is anything, Mahatreda, even things which do not relate to Yom Tov at all, you're allowed to carry on Yom Tov. There's no issue of carrying at all on Yom Tov. The Rabbanan said, however, that things which are not necessary for Yom Tov, okay, forget about eating. But let's say a siddur you need a shul, a talis you shul, a child you want to carry, a lulav. But things that are totally not necessary, with the Rabbanan we don't want you to carry. That's Rashi's view. Tosfos' view is that no, that Mahatorah, anything which is at least l'tzoyrech tzas, you need it a little bit for Yom Tov. Mahatorah you're allowed to carry, but things which are not tzorech tzas at all, for example, stones and even midrab, even Mahatorah, you're not allowed to carry them on Yom Tov. That's what. That's how Tosfos brings me one. Some of the Shayim will in that way. Let's go back to the Gemara. I proved Rabbi Yechon agrees with the same sentiment. But also, Rabbi Yechon holds. So arguing this very principle, the Tani Tanaka Rabbi Yechon, and also we had the student teaching a Beitza of Rabbi Yechon. It says as follows: somebody cooked the Gid Hanoshe, the sciatic nerve, the thigh, the hindquarters, together with milk, which is basa b'chalav. On Yom Tov, so he did a multiple number of sins. And he ate it, so he cooked basa b'chalav, and he ate basa b'chalav, and he cooked on Yom Tov, made a fire. Chomesh, you get 5 malchus, 5 aveis. What are they? Like first of all, you cooked what do you call? Cooked basa b'chalav. You cooked on Yom Tov. Now, since when are we? You're only allowed to cook on Yom Tov if you are going to eat from it. But since you're not allowed to eat the gid, so therefore you're not allowed to cook it on Yom Tov. And in other words, we don't say metoich. We don't say because you're allowed to cook things that you're allowed to eat. If you're allowed to cook things that you're not allowed to eat. No, there's no such thing metoich. It's forbidden. It's number 1. Number 2, like mishum oichel gid. You ate the gid hanosha. You're not allowed to eat a gid hanosha either. That's number 2. And number 3, V'loikim, the Torah said by Yaakov, not like good notion. V'loike, Akela Yechus Ben Yisrael, it says in the passage there. V'loikim, Mishum Bevashel Basar Chalav. You cook Basar Chalav. It says 3 times in the Torah that you shouldn't cook. So 1 for eating, 1 for hanab, 1 for cooking. So it's the 3rd one's for cooking. V'loikim, Mishum Oichel Basar Chalav. The 4th one is, but you ate Basar Chalav. And V'loike, you also get Malchus, Mishum Havora. You also get malchus for lighting a fire on Yom Tov. Again, you're lighting a fire, but there's no benefit because what you're doing is you're cooking something which you're not allowed to eat. Not everyone agrees that whether fire is included or not on Yom Tov. So on Yom Tov here alone, you're getting 2 different malchus. The machlek is whether on Yom Tov you say chiluk malachas, for each malach you get a separate malchus or not. Seems with this Beitza that he holds that you do. Anyway, the bottom line is that 2 of the 5 avedas are that you did something on Yom Tov which is totally unnecessary, and you get over mahat Torah. In other words, we don't follow the principle of metoich. Amalei puk tani lebro. Bechna said, take this Beitza and throw it outside, learn it outside. Havara ubishul ain't a mishnah. Remove havara and bishul from there because we have a principle called metoich. The im tim tzolem and mishnah. If you can tell me that what you quoted me is accurate, then it must be the author of this particular Beitza is Beis Shammai. The Amri, he says, we don't say metoich shehutra haitzol letzorech hutra namish loy letzorech. Since Shammai says that you're not allowed to carry things which do not pertain to food directly, is hachinami lamim. We don't say metoich shehutra havarol letzorech. Therefore, he also holds that you can only light a fire, you can only cook things which you are going to eat. If you cooked a gid hanosha on Yom Tov, you will not get punished for the cooking of it and for the fire of it. Why not? Even the Ami, because we believe in the principle of since Basil clearly says you're allowed to carry things which are not directly related to food, Hachanami say do with cooking and fire. Since you're allowed to turn on a fire and cook things which are necessary, okay, so there must be that it's not. That it's we see clearly that the argument revolves around the concept of metoich. Next Mishnah, continuing in the arguments of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, we learned in Parashat Kohath that there are 24 gifts that you have to give to a kohen. Besides Truma and Maisa, which are included, there's other gifts also. For example, every time you shecht an animal, you have to give a part of the animal to the kohen. 3 parts: the zroya, the foreleg, the lechayim, the jawbone, and the keva and the stomach. These are called matnas kuna. You have to give it to a kohen. So Beis Shammai says, "Ein Meilichin challah." Also challah you give to the kohen. You will not transport, you will not freight across the challah or matanos, the parts of the animal that you normally give to a kohen, the kohen be Yom Tov. Beis Shammai says you do not bring it to a kohen on Yom Tov. When did you shecht this animal? You permitted to shecht on Yom Tov. He says, Bein shehu mum emish, whether you separated these 3 parts already or the challah yesterday already, so perhaps it makes sense that, why bring it on Yom Tov? You could have done it yesterday, so we disallow it. And Bein Shehumim Hayayim, even if you did it today, even if you separated those parts today, you only did it today. So why should you be able to carry it? You bring food to the kohen. You don't do it on Yom Tov. You don't do it. It's a tircha. You don't need it. You can wait till after Yom Tov. And if you want to eat the meat, you have to separate, because otherwise you have to separate. So So we allow you to separate on Yom Tov, because otherwise you cannot eat the meat, but we don't want you to bring it. No, we allow you to do what you need. But once you separate it, you don't have to give it to the kohen. You can eat the animal without giving it to the kohen. But if you eat the animal without separating those three parts, you're over naseh. So you separate the three parts, the zroyed, the chaim, the keva, and then you eat the animal, but don't give it to the kohen on Yom Tov. Wait till the following day. And the reason, Pasha, why you don't give it to the kohen is because we don't want you to separate truma and other things as well. So therefore, we limit to whatever you allow you to do. And Beisil says matin. Beisil says don't bring truma in here as well. See, since you're allowed to separate it, you're allowed to bring it to the kohen as well. It says shava. It doesn't literally mean the word shava. It means let's draw an analogy, a parallel. Chala umatana. What's chala and matana? And matanas. These three gifts. Matana kohen. These are gifts that belong to the kohen. What else do we have that belongs to kohen? Truma is a matana l'kohen. Truma is also a gift that we give to the kohen. Everyone agrees you don't bring truma on Yom Tov to a kohen because you're not allowed to even separate the truma on Yom Tov. Is kach ein melichinas a matana. So too, these matanas gifts that belong to a kohen is royal l'chaim challah. Don't bring it to a kohen. In fact, challah is called truma. Don't bring it to a kohen. Amru lahem Beis Hillel says. No. I disagree with you. Ima Martin but Truma. You know why by Truma on Yom Tov you shouldn't bring it. I don't care when you separate. You don't bring it on Yom Tov. Since you're not allowed to separate Truma on Yom Tov, then don't bring it either. If you're going to bring it, we're scared you're going to separate. No, bring it. But the matanas, you're allowed to separate on Yom Tov. You want to eat, we allow you to shech an animal for Simchas Yom Tov. So of course we allow you to separate the matanas in order for you to be able to eat. So therefore, why shouldn't you be able to bring it to the kohen as well? I don't see the problem. So that's what the Gemara says. Now, when the Beis Shammai says, I don't care when you separated it before Yom Tov or on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to bring it to a kohen. So it doesn't talk to or tell us when he actually shechted. So Kasalka Dafach, right now we think, that when he says that you separated today, it's because probably you shechted on Yom Tov, so you separate on Yom Tov, don't bring it to the kohen. The two cases Beis Shammai says, whether you separated on Yom Tov, whether you separated before Yom Tov, the pashtas you separate right after the shechita. So separate on Yom Tov means you shechted on Yom Tov, and he still does not allow it, even though you're allowed to shecht, you're allowed to separate, but don't bring it to the kohen. And you separate every Yom Tov, obviously means you shechted before Yom Tov. So Mani Masnisin, who's the author of our Mishnah? There's three different ways of understanding the argument of Shammai and Hillel. So which way does our Mishnah follow? Lo Rabbi Yossi, it won't be Rabbi Yossi's way of looking at it, nor will it be Rabbi Yehuda's way. El Achedim. The Tanya, we learn what's going on. So first, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda limits the argument of Shammai and Hillel different than our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda. Lo nechel go beisham beisil al matana shehum ben Yom Tov shemalich matana shehum ma'ayin. Rabbi Yehuda says not only does Beis Shammai agree with Beis Hillel that if you shechted an animal on Yom Tov, you said that you separated those three parts, that you can bring it to the kohen on Yom Tov. Beis Shammai holds also you can bring it on Yom Tov. You shechted today, why can't you bring it? Beis Shammai holds that even that which you shechted out of Yom Tov, if you shechted on Yom Tov and you're going to bring certain things to the kohen anyway, or you have challah, you're going to bring to the kohen anyway, but you separate on Yom Tov and you baked on Yom Tov, you can bring it like a drag along. You can also bring with you the things that you shechted before Yom Tov and bring it along. Once you have a license to bring the things that you did on Yom Tov, bring along also those things which you did before Yom Tov. You just didn't have a chance to bring it to the kohen. So what's the machlekes Shammai and Hillel? Totally not like our Mishnah. You know the whole machlekes is in one isolated case. You shechted it before Yom Tov and you separated before Yom Tov. Now you could have brought it to before Yom Tov, you just didn't. Now there's an argument: can you bring that on Yom Tov on its own? Can you bring it on its own? Beis Shammai said you cannot bring it on its own. Why should you? Should have brought it yesterday. And Beis Hillel said you could bring it. You could bring it on its own. That's the argument. And this is what Beis Shammai is saying. We compare challah umatonis. We compare challah and these gifts. Is a matana l'koyin, is a gift to a koyin, and truma is a matana l'koyin. So Kishem, so Shammai said, the fact is, truma you cannot do on Yom Tov. When you do truma before Yom Tov, and the din is that truma before Yom Tov you cannot bring to a kohen on Yom Tov. Should have brought before Yom Tov. So too, that challah and the 24 and the zroy l'chaim kavit, 3 gifts to a kohen. If you shechted before Yom Tov or you baked before Yom Tov, you should have brought before Yom Tov. You didn't. You cannot bring it on Yom Tov, just like truma. Kishem she'ei malicha truma, just like you don't bring truma, kach malicha is matan. You cannot bring these gifts. Amru lahem Beis Hillel lo. Beis Hillel said you cannot compare the gift I I argue with you, and I believe that these gifts, even though you shechted Erev Yom Tov, and you could have brought Erev Yom Tov, if you didn't, you can bring it on its own on Yom Tov. Why? When it comes to Truma, I concede you cannot bring it on Yom Tov because it has no shaykhs to Yom Tov. You cannot give Truma on Yom Tov, so therefore you cannot ferry it across to the Yom Tov to the Kohen as well, and you should have brought it for Yom Tov. There's no, you have no right to separate it on Yom Tov, so therefore it has no shaykhs to Yom Tov. Don't bring it. What happens if you shet an animal on Yom Tov? You can separate these parts on Yom Tov. So the separation of these parts have a shaykhs to Yom Tov. So even though you did it out of Yom Tov, you can still bring it to a kohen on Yom Tov because it's connected to Yom Tov. Shezakoi baramosim. It's a shaykh to Yom Tov. So that's Abudah. So Abudah's version is that the only time you're arguing is something you did out of Yom Tov and you didn't do anything on Yom Tov. Can you bring it to the kohen on Yom Tov? Totally different than our Mishnah. Next case, Rabbi Yossi. Maybe Rabbi Yossi is our Mishnah. Let's say Rabbi Yossi first. There's no argument. Everyone agrees, just the opposite of a Mishnah. Everyone agrees, including Bishama. You can bring all the gifts, whether you shechted on Yom Tov, whether you shechted before Yom Tov, because it's shaykh to Yom Tov, everyone knows you can bring it to the kohen on Yom Tov. In fact, what's the argument? The argument is about the truma. Just the opposite. They're arguing about truma, and truma could have only been done out of Yom Tov, and you didn't have a chance to bring it to the kohen. Can you bring it to the kohen on Yom Tov because it's food in the gate of the kohen? But you could have brought it before. Are we guys, if we allow you to bring the truma on Yom Tov, then maybe you'll separate it on Yom Tov or not? Bishami says, you cannot bring the truma to the kohen. And maybe the reason is because if you allow you to bring it, next time you'll separate it. You could bring it. Nothing to do with our Mishnah. And in fact, it was Beis Hillel who was drawing this parallel. The Kachoi Beis Hillel done in Chala Matanas. Chala Matanas is a Matan L'Kohen, and Truma is a Matan L'Kohen. It's Kishem Shemalichin is Matanas, just like you're permitted to bring the Matanas to the Kohen on Yom Tov, even though you shechted before Yom Tov. Kach Melichin Truma, I hold you can take the Truma also. Beis Hillel holds, in fact, you could take Truma on Yom Tov, just like the Chala. No, you know why Matanas you allowed to bring to the kohen on Yom Tov, even though you did it before Yom Tov, because you could, if you want, you could actually separate the Matanas on Yom Tov proper, so that you can bring it in. There's nothing to be geyser. So like because you're allowed to separate them on Yom Tov. So what are you worried about? Comes to Truma, if we allow you to bring on Yom Tov, next time you might separate on Yom Tov. So again, our Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yossi. This is opinion number 3. They learn, and it seems a little comish. It says here, Achenim say, there's no argument, there's no discussion when it comes to Truma. Everyone agrees Truma you don't break. What they're arguing about, El al hamatanas. Now, the Achenim don't explain these matanas. When did you separate them on Yom Tov proper or even before Yom Tov? But we're going to say that probably like our Mishnah. This must be about Mishnah, must be Achedim. So therefore, it makes no distinction when you separated, whether you did it on Yom Tov or you did it before Yom Tov. Shebeshami says, Ein Melichin, even if you did it on Yom Tov, I don't want you to bring it across, just like Truma. And Beis Hillel Melichin, even if you did it before Yom Tov, you could bring it across. So Lema Achedim, let's say that our Mishnah here follows Achedim B'Loi Rabbi Yehuda, which usually the halacha would be like Rabbi Yehuda, and here our Mishnah seems not to be following Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Rava says, Meek Tani, did Achedim say over here, Shehurmu Mahayim, Mushnishchru Mahayim? All the Achedim say is that if you separated it, the Matanas, Bishama says you cannot bring it. Maybe the Achedim are talking about only yesterday's. Maybe the Achedim are talking about only Erev Yom Tov. That because you did Erev Yom Tov, you separated Matanas, Bishama says don't bring it because you should have brought yesterday. But maybe Bishama, according to the Achedim, hold that if you shechted it on Yom Tov proper, maybe they hold you could bring it. Not like our Mishnah. How do you know our Mishnah is Achedim? So Gemara answers no, because it says Shahur Muktani, because it says Stam Shahur Mum Ula sorry, so the Olam Shchitasan Me'emesh, the Shchita is from yesterday. So therefore, maybe they're only talking about yesterday's. So therefore, what it says, Lema Rabbi Yehuda maybe our Mishnah doesn't say when you actually shechted. All it says is when you separated it. So maybe our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda, and our Mishnah is talking about that you shechted it yesterday. And they shechted it yesterday, and you didn't shecht anything today, and that's why the Rabbi Shammai said, I don't care when you separated it yesterday, today, you cannot bring it to a kohen. So maybe our Mishnah is only Rabbi Yehuda and not Achedim either. Why? Because our Mishnah is talking about yesterday. It doesn't say, our Mishnah doesn't say a bigger Chiddush. You shechted today. Wouldn't be a bigger Chiddush? Our Mishnah would have said, even if you shechted today, Beishamai says you cannot bring it to a coin. Our Mishnah just says you separated it yesterday or you separated it today, which means, but the shechting always happened before Yom Tov. And that's Halos Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that if you shechted before Yom Tov, Beishamai says, and you didn't shecht anything on Yom Tov, you cannot bring it on its own. So the Chayda, our Mishnah actually maybe is Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore it's not like Achedim. Okay, so it's not Achedim, but at least our Mishnah we found one opinion Rabbi Yehuda, but it doesn't agree with the other two opinions. Says Gemara, no, I can argue that our Mishnah works out whether you follow Rabbi Yehuda and whether you follow Achedim. How is that? Because I feel them Achedim. Uvahan of the Nishchatu Me'emesh, when the Achedim say as well that they're arguing about when Machedim say that they're arguing, Bashama is talking about that whenever you separate it, it's also talking about you shechted before Yom Tov. Says what's going on here? The Achedim, the way you learn Pshat and Achedim. Rabbi Yehuda clearly talks about only if you shechted before Yom Tov and you didn't shecht anything on Yom Tov, whether, and I don't care when you separate it, you're not allowed to bring it on its own on Yom Tov. Fine. But you tell me now Achedim are saying exactly the same thing. So what's the machlekes between Achedim and Rabbi Yehuda? Says the Gemara, the difference is whether we say drag along. And that is, Rabbi Yehuda holds, Rabbi Yehuda is lenient. According to Beis Shammai, if you shechted also on Yom Tov, and you're bringing the matonis of that to the kohen, or you're giving a challah, you baked on Yom Tov, you separate challah, you're bringing that to the kohen. Once you're bringing something which you're allowed to bring to the kohen, then we can also drag along that which you shechted before Yom Tov, bring it along with it. And the Achedim say no, there's no such thing as a drag along. Anything which you did before Yom Tov, you should have brought before Yom Tov, you cannot bring it on Yom Tov proper. That's the argument of Achedim Rabbi Yehuda. But they both agree that the Beis Shammai is talking about that you shechted it before Yom Tov, you shouldn't bring it on Yom Tov on its own. And therefore, our Mishnah can follow the view of Rabbi Yehuda and Achedim. In fact, that you're going to everybody allowed to bring it. The machlekes of a truma, and then could be silly. You're allowed to even bring truma as well. Yeah. What the Hill says, just like you're allowed to bring chalas and the matanis, so too you're allowed to bring truma. I'm not worried that if you're allowed to bring it, the next time you're going to separate truma and not. Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Tuva, Rabbi Nechemia have like garba the chamra the truma. He once had a barrel full of wine of truma. Also, come keep Rabbi Yisrael. Amalai, he said to him, to the kohen, can I bring this barrel of truma of wine to a kohen? Amalai hachi Amar Rabbi Mishmul halachi to Rabbi Yisrael, which says that according to Basil, you even truma on, even though you brought it before, even though you separated before Yom Tov, you should have brought it to the kohen for Yom Tov. You didn't make that. You didn't have the opportunity. You can bring it to the kohen on Yom Tov proper, because Rabbi Yisrael's version of the argument of the Hillel and Basil and Beis Shammai. Says the Gemara, the Rabbi Barab Chanan, the host of Rabbi Barab Chanan, he had Asuraisa the Chardon. He had bundles of mustard in their stalks, and the mustard seeds were still inside the stalk. Amle, he asked a question. Is he allowed to break up the stalks and to take out the seeds from the Yom Tov? Is he allowed to do that on Yom Tov or not? Is it like, shechting and cooking? We said before that, you're allowed to do malachas which are necessary for oichel nefesh. You're not allowed to take out the stalk, but here maybe you're allowed to because you want to eat it straight. Or since you could have done it, because this is a tool of dish, this is a mafarik, you're separating the seeds from its stalk. This is like dosh, threshing. Or do we say that threshing is not allowed on Yom Tov? We allow you to cook and bake, but we don't allow you to thresh. Or not? That's the question. So Gemara says, so Rabbi Khan did not know, but the answer is also the Kame, the Rabbi came before Rabbi and he asked the question. The Rabbi said, you know what? Don't do it the normal way of threshing, but do it in a backhanded way. Don't use any implement. That you just rub it in your hands, and then it will break the stalks, and the kidneys and the seeds will come out. Because even on Shabbos, if you do a malacha with a shinyan, not the normal way, it's only asam and rabbanon. And on Yom Tov, we weren't geyser, especially you need it for food. Abaya asked a question that says in a brayse, if you, let's say, took out the seeds, let's say you broke the stalks out of Shabbat. Now, when you break the stalk this way, you'll have pieces of the stalk together with the seeds. In other words, you have to separate them. You have to segregate the pieces from the seeds. Is Hamoil Erev Shabbos. If someone does Erev Shabbos, the following day, Menafeyach Miyad Liyad. What you do is that you blow it and you move from hand to hand, but you eat it. So in other words, you're not separating it the normal way, and you eat it straight away. Don't use a funnel. When they used to use a funnel, they used to put all the seeds with the parts, the inedible parts together, and then it was a narrow chute, and then it would block those parts which were not the seed. The seed was smaller, and the seed would come right through. That's a kanoin. Don't do that. And so too, don't use a tamchu, which is a large plate, and they would shake it, and then it would sort of separate the seeds. These are not really the primary tool used to separate things, but it's a tool. We don't want you to tool, just use your hands. And do a little bit at a time. Just do a little bit at a time. What about Hamayim Malilas? But if you did it at Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, we're more relaxed. The following day, Menafeyach al yad. So you don't have to do it from hand to hand. You just do a blow a little bit at a time, but you can eat. And here we go more relaxed. You don't have to use your hands like we said by Shabbos. Yad al yad means a little bit at a time. I feel a bit knain. You can use this instrument. It's not really the primary instrument. Even on Shabbos, only also Rabbanon. You can use it on Yom Tov. I feel a bit tamcho using the large plate. Avaloi bit tavla, but not. These are dedicated. Not these are dedicated instruments, a sieve and other kinds of filters that are dedicated for this particular purpose to separate the seeds from the parts of them that you cannot eat. That you shouldn't use on Yom Tov. Me'erev, so it says clearly in the Beitza here. Me'erev Yom Tov. When did you separate the seeds from the stalks? Erev Yom Tov. But the Yom Tov law, even through a shina, you're not allowed to. It says Hamayla Melulas. Sounds like you did Erev Yom Tov. Kasha Rabba who allowed Rav Chanan, Rav Chanan's host to do that on Yom Tov. Says Rabba, no right in their room. No. I feel a tame of the Yom Tov. Even on Yom Tov, you can go ahead and make the shina. But I did the Tony Reisha Me'erev Shabbos because when it came to Shabbos, the only time you're allowed to do it is Erev Shabbos. Tony Sefer Namer Yom Tov, mention of Yom Tov. Says the Gemara in Cain, if so, that you're allowed to go ahead on Yom Tov and produce these seeds. Now the rule by Truma is you're not liable for Truma until you complete it. So when it comes to grains, we say when is Gmar Malacha? When it's in a keddy, when you pile it up and then you smooth it out. Meruach. Expression more always is meruach. Meruach means smoothing it out. You have a pile and then you make the pile smooth. So that's called Gmar Malacha. Over here in this case, when you took the seeds out of the stalk, so that's the Gmar Malacha for the stalks. And if you do this on Yom Tov, if it seems like you're now, if you're separating them on Yom Tov itself through a shinui, you now completed the malacha. So now they became chayiv and truma, and now you're telling me that you're allowed to eat it. Well, so what's the excuse why you're allowed to rub this? Because you're allowed to eat it. That means you're separating truma on Yom Tov. So why did we say before that nobody says you can give truma on Yom Tov? Here you have an instance where you can give truma on Yom Tov. Where it says, that you can separate on Yom Tov, because when you're Meilul Malilis, you're now Chayiv and Truma, and you're allowed to eat it. So obviously you're separating the Truma. But now yet we learned, and now we should just learn Ima Martin, the Truma is different. So you cannot separate Truma on Yom Tov. Like Kash, it's not a problem. Says the Gemara. It's actually an argument. Everyone holds you allowed to be Meilul Malilis. I asked the question, are you making Truma on Yom Tov or not? You're right. There's a machlekes Rebbe and Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda in this case, whether you have to give truma or not. And now Mishnah holds, like Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda, that you don't, and therefore he says, our Mishnah says, there's no case of giving truma, of ever being given truma on Yom Tov. What's the story there? What's the argument Rebbe and Rabbi Yisrael? The question is the truma when you take the seeds out, extract the seeds from the stalk? And what's the argument? It goes as follows. The time you learn, hechnis shibon, and you brought the stalks into the house, lasem and isa, and your purpose is to make dough from it. Is oichlem and ara, you're allowed to eat from it a snack, because since you didn't put it in the pile, so there's no gemar malacha until you brought it to the house. Therefore, you're allowed to have a snack, because as long as the crop has not yet experienced a gemar malacha, you're allowed to eat a snack, not a permanent meal. The Rebbe don't want you to permanent meal, but you're allowed to have a snack from it because you're not really chayiv truma yet. And what about l'mayla melulis? What about you brought it into the house to eat only a little bit at a time, directly just to eat the seeds? Rebbe says, well, that's the Gemar Malacha, because you don't want to use it for making cake or bread or anything else. So that's the Gemar Malacha. You're not going to pile up the carry. You want to eat a little bit, one stalk at a time. So therefore, you're chayv now with truma, and therefore you're not allowed to eat a snack from it anymore, because it's Gemar Malacha for its purpose. You just completed the Malacha, and therefore you're not allowed to even have a snack until you separate and give truma. Because you're not going to do anything afterwards. So according to Rebbe Taka, you're chayv and truma. And Rebbe would hold Taka, you're allowed to do this on Yom Tov, and he Taka holds. There is a situation where you can give truma on Yom Tov proper. But Rabbi Yehuda says potter. Rabbi Yehuda says no. It says clearly the Gondcha, and the Gondcha means the only time you're liable for my side of truma is when you pile up in a keddy, in a pile, and you smooth it out. That's called meruach. And since this is bypass that, so therefore you're not chayv truma at all. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's no chiv of truma on Yom Tov ever. So our Mishnah father is Yehuda. Says, what do you mean? But even according to Yehuda, there is some. I'll give you an example where there is a chiv truma. For example, if you allow him to roll the stalk in your hand to extract the seed from the stalk, how? Following case. You brought in the shibolin, and your intention was to make dough, and then. Then you say, what? It's piled already up, so it's chayv and truma, right? It's already chayv and truma because it's piled up. But then you change your mind. You took a couple of stalks and say, what? I'm not going to use this to make dough. I'm going to go ahead and eat it the way it is. So the tavla b'yayma, and here it's already chayv and truma, and now that you change your mind and you want to go ahead and eat it straight away, so now it's tevel. You're not allowed to have a snack. It's tevel, you chayv truma, and yet. You're allowed to eat it. You just said you're allowed to roll in your hand. You're allowed to eat it. So so we see that even according to Yehuda, sometimes if you pile a keddy and then you change your mind, you still chayv truma, and you can give truma on Yom Tov. The Hakam Mishnah says you don't give truma on Yom Tov. Elamai truma. What our Mishnah means when it says you don't give truma on Yom Tov, it meant roiv truma. The probability of this happening is so low that we can say that generally there's no truma given on Yom Tov. So that's part of the Gemara, and we'll continue then on the sugya tomorrow. Tomorrow we're back to 7.